The Apostle Paul taught that the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead is the foundation of Christianity. Destroy this one point, and you destroy the faith. Dr. James Kennedy investigates evidence for the resurrection next on the best of truths that transform. Truths That Transform is the radio program of Coral Ridge Ministries and Dr. D. James Kennedy. Dr. Kennedy is the author of numerous books, including Turn It to Gold, Evangelism Explosion, Learning to Live with the People You Love, and Why I Believe. Stay tuned for insights on Christian discipleship in the 1990s and beyond. Scholars have called it the most attested fact of ancient history. Skeptics have a hard time knowing what to say about it. It is the fact that on the third day after his death on a Roman cross, Jesus of Nazareth came out of the tomb alive, victorious over death, King of kings and Lord of lords. But not everyone believes this fact, and if you don't, make sure you stay with us for the next half hour. The evidence of history might help change your mind. Now let's join Dr. James Kennedy.
The adherents of most of the great religions of the world can take their friends, if they happen to be traveling to the right spot, to a certain place and say with some, I believe, misguided pride that here is the grave of our great founder. This Christians cannot do, because we cannot say, here lies the body of the great founder of the Christian religion, because the tomb is empty, and Jesus is not there. He has risen from the dead. Today I would like to speak to you on the subject, how I know that Christ rose from the dead. Many people believe that Christianity is based upon legends or myths or uncertainties and things that we really don't know about, and the wish is really father of the thought, and that these all disappear into the mists of time, and there's no real solid evidence for it at all. Well, they could not possibly be more mistaken. The number of testimonies from historians and legal scholars is so innumerable that it would take me the rest of this message just to quote them. So I'll limit myself to one. Professor Thomas Arnold is, of course, the author of the famous 3-volume History of Rome, and was appointed to the chair of modern history at Oxford. This great historian and scholar said this. Listen carefully. Quote, I have been used for many years to study the histories of other times and to examine and weigh the evidence of those who have written about them. And I know of no one fact in the history of mankind which is proved by better and fuller evidence of every sort to the understanding of a fair inquirer than the great sign which God has given us, that Christ died and rose again from the dead. Again, this great professor, modern history, Oxford, said, I know of no one fact in all of history which is proved by better and fuller evidence of every sort than the resurrection of Christ. My friends, if the resurrection of Christ be not true, then we don't know anything about anything in all of the history of the world. Because this is the best proved single fact of all. Well, let me list just a few of the evidences for the resurrection, some that you may never have thought of before. There are a great many, and I'm going to limit myself to just a few. The first evidence that you may never have thought about for the resurrection is this. You. That you are here is a great evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. That you are here as a part of the Church of Jesus Christ. 1 1,600,000,000 people in this world today are part of that church. It is the largest institution that exists or ever has existed on planet Earth. Now, somebody has well said that the Grand Canyon wasn't created by an Indian dragging a stick. And the largest institution in the history of the world wasn't created by the figment of somebody's imagination. How did it come about? Well, it's interesting that skeptics are agreed as to how it came about. And on what are they agreed? They are agreed that in about 30 A.D., in the city of Jerusalem, Palestine, that the apostles of Jesus of Nazareth began to preach that he had risen from the dead. And that message of the resurrection from the dead spread all over Israel and all over the Near East and all over the Roman Empire and transformed the world. A second test evidence for the resurrection that you may never have thought of before is simply this, that you are here today and not yesterday. I'm speaking of the tremendous change that took place in the day of the Sabbath. The first century Jews were fanatical Sabbatarians. They would stone a person to death for carrying a stick on the Sabbath. And on several occasions they tried to kill Jesus for healing someone on the Sabbath. The early church was made up almost entirely of Jews. How is it that these fanatical Sabbatarians were willing to abandon their century-old belief in the seventh-day Sabbath and began to worship and rest and glorify God and to have all of their church activities on the first day of the week and not the seventh? There is only one explanation. It is given by the apostles themselves and their followers, and that is because on the first day of the week, Jesus Christ rose from the dead. So here we have this tremendous institution of the Christian Sabbath as a second evidence for the resurrection. The third evidence that I would like to set before you is the fact of the empty tomb. Here is a rock upon which may be dashed to pieces all manner of doubts. Now let me say that it is very clear, the entire testimony of antiquity is clear, that the tomb of Jesus Christ was empty. It was never suggested by anyone at that time that the tomb was not empty. In fact, the explanation that the priest told the soldiers to give for what had happened was that the disciples stole the body. None of them ever tried to refute the preaching of the Christians by saying, "What do you mean he is risen from the dead? Why, he's still there. I just went out at my lunch break and checked the tomb. The seal is still there. He is still entombed." The fourth evidence that I would mention is the post-resurrection appearances of Jesus. At least 10 times, Jesus appeared before his ascension. Afterward, he appeared again to Paul and to John on the island of Patmos. But at least 10 times after the resurrection and before the ascension, Jesus appeared. He appeared to 1 or to 2 or to 3 or to 8 or to 11 or to 500 people at one time. Numerous appearances that he made over those 40 days before he was taken up. And secondly, as a result of these appearances, the disciples were transformed. Their lives were totally revolutionized by this. You need to remember that after the death of Jesus, what was the state of the apostolic band? They were totally demoralized. They were totally dejected. They were filled with fear. They locked themselves in an upper room for fear of the Jews. Peter said, "I go a-fishing." They were about to go back to their homes to disperse, to give the whole thing up. The two disciples on the road to Emmaus said, "We had thought that this was he that would deliver Israel, but alas, it was not to be." The whole thing had collapsed. It was all a shambles. It was over. Fini. Kaput.